Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest topics in the sport. This week, we've got the MMA Junkie Radio Boys with gorgeous George and Goes, as well as the mayor of the fight sphere himself, Nolan King. So let's just jump right into it, guys. After a holiday weekend, it is time for the big one. UFC 264 Fight Week is upon us, and I probably don't need to tell you that the main event is the trilogy bout between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. Now, 6 months ago, it was Poirier who scored the knockout win, but McGregor has admitted he was also training for a boxing match at the time. He was prepping for Poirier, and let's also not forget that this one is going to be played in front of a packed house, and there is no one that shines under the bright lights like Conor McGregor. So, as this huge trilogy bout nears, who do you think has the advantage in this fight? Is it the guy that just won 6 months ago, or the guy who says he's made all the right adjustments leading into this one? We'll put 4 minutes on the clock, and we'll start it with you, George.
The advantage goes to Dustin Poirier because he knocked him out 6 months ago. He looked great. He erased the demons from the fight in 2014, which was way more personal. This one they both entered, as fathers and husbands and prize fighters, and they kept it really, really respectful. But in the end, they had to get down. Dustin Poirier won. But this is the weird thing, guys, is why am I leaning towards McGregor? I'll tell you why, because over the weekend, I was watching some Conor McGregor footage, both fights versus Poirier, the ones versus Diaz, because I wanted to see adjustments in fights and things like that. No matter how you break down the fight, the results, whatever, because he's basically 2-2 against those two guys. The one thing I came to realize is just McGregor is, that storm you hear. I gotta weather the storm. I mean, he is a hurricane for all of round one and most of round two. Let's do him half of round two. And he just hits so hard and so pinpoint. And he does make adjustments. And maybe that's why I'm leaning towards McGregor. But yeah, I mean, Poirier he looks so complete, I guess, to be able to get that one against McGregor. That one really, really stung him. So again, advantage Poirier, but I just don't know why I'm leaning towards McGregor.
Or doesn't that make it interesting? One guy has the advantage, but you're still leaning towards the other way. So, Goes, what do you think? Does one guy hold an edge over the other in here? I mean, we just saw the fight happen not that long ago. Can that much change in between fights?
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with George on this one. I'm going to go Conor McGregor with the advantage because, look, no matter what happens in this fight for Conor McGregor, there's life after this. There's always opportunities to make big money. There's more on the line for Dustin Poirier. I think he's feeling more pressure. But remember, this third fight here is mimicking more the first fight than it does the second fight. Where we're at, the environment, these are all things that mimic the first fight, okay? So when you think about it, we're in Vegas, there's gonna be a crowd, and look, in every professional sport, the home team usually has a pretty good advantage. And if you've never been in town when Conor McGregor fights in Las Vegas, there's a giant Irish contingent that comes out. That is your home field advantage. All of those memories from that first fight, Dustin Poirier is going to have to relive all that stuff. He's going to have to go through all that and go back to those emotions. Conor McGregor's been in the situation where he's lost a fight and come back. He's been through all that type of stuff. So I think right now, the advantage is for Conor McGregor. And every day that passes, the mental warfare starts. And that press conference is going to be a big deal. That's going to be the deciding factor of where Dustin Poirier's head is right now.
Yeah. You know what, man? I think you're on it. It seems so weird to think that, hey, just fighting in front of a crowd could change the dynamics of the fight itself. That's not where the actual X's and O's and the matchups, but I have to believe it. So, Nolan, what do you think? I mean, we just saw Dustin Poirier win this fight 6 months ago. Are we really all saying that Conor has the advantage here?
Yeah, I got to make it 3 for 3 here. I definitely agree with what Goes just said. The crowd, the environment is something that, Dustin didn't have to deal with the second time, but the first fight, it was such a big storyline, the mental side of things. In fighting in front of a largely empty arena back in January, Dustin, I think, was very focused. He was able to focus on what he needed to do to get that win. But now he's got that mental warfare back. And who's to say that when this press conference happens on Thursday, that we don't see the old Conor McGregor come out, maybe with some trash talk. I know they had the charity spat, which clearly is something that I think is important to Dustin and bothered him. So sure, Dustin won the fight last time. McGregor got knocked out, but who's to say that they both can't make adjustments? And I don't know, man. Conor's he's a rematch guy, and I think he gets it done again.
Amazing, man. Conor McGregor, a special athlete indeed. You can never count him out of a fight, especially a big one like this. I cannot wait for Saturday night. Guys, it's certainly not getting as much attention as the headliner, and understandably so, but Gilbert Burns versus Stephen Thompson is a very meaningful fight in the welterweight division, which is a weight class that just doesn't kind of really seem to have a clear number one contender right now. You got Colby Covington. He wants his rematch. Poor Leon Edwards, man, that guy's been waiting forever for a shot at the title. But Burns and Wonderboy, they're right there too. So tell me, what's on the line in this fight? Is someone getting a title shot after this fight? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock again. Goes, you get us started this time.
I'm going to have to go with no on this one, guys. I mean, there's always an opportunity. We see what's going on with Ciryl Gane and Derek Lewis. Yeah, I never know what the UFC is going to do, but I'm pretty sure here it's going to be kind of a tough task to anoint one of those guys and give them a title shot. We're talking about Kamaru Usman, a guy who is a dominant champion, okay? A lot of the names that are being thrown out there, they're all rematches, and that's what happens when you have a dominant champ like that. The one guy that isn't a rematch is Wonderboy Thompson, but when you think about it, let's just say he goes out there and has a great performance. But when you put those two guys in front of each other, you have two of the nicest people on the planet, let alone in the UFC. How do you sell that fight? You need some other kind of component. That component that I'm talking about is some sort of heat. You need some kind of heat, and the guy that delivers that is Colby Covington. So I don't see how that guy is not going to be next for Kamaru Usman, and it's mostly because of how dominant Kamaru Usman has been in his career. So whoever wins this fight between Gilbert Burns and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, I could probably see them being matched up later on with Leon Edwards.
Goes, I can't believe you're suggesting that it's not always the most deserving contender that gets the title shot. Pay-per-view sales, they don't think about that stuff in the UFC office. Come on. All right, Nolan, what do you think? I mean, especially I think he made the point there. Wonderboy is probably the one that would be the most deserving because he's not, a rematch. But what do you think? Is this a number one contender fight, or is this just not even in the realm of possibility?
I mean, it's certainly in the realm of possibility. I think, like you said, like Go said, Wonderboy definitely has the stronger case. As much as I like Gilbert Burns, and I think he's a great fighter, I'm not sure at this point in time, a standalone win after the loss he had to Usman would be enough to get him back into the title picture, at least in a challenging position. So for me, Wonderboy, if he wins this, he's on a 3-fight winning streak. He's getting up there in age. He's somebody that's promotable, somebody that always brings it. I mean, sure, he's had losses in recent years, but one of them was controversial to Darren Till. It's just, he's got a good resume, but I think there's somebody a step ahead of him who's Leon Edwards. But Leon's consistency with the company and sometimes with the matchmaking has been weird. So who knows? Maybe Wonderboy could somehow cut in front, but this is still at least, a title fight away. We still have to have Kamaru versus Colby come first. So I'm not sure whoever wins this fight would want to wait out, for 1, possibly 2 title fights before they compete again. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to say odds are this is not any sort of title eliminator opportunity for these guys.
It's interesting, right? Because Usman has said the name Wonderboy, and I think Ali Abdelaziz has said the name Wonderboy as well, so might be deserving. We know how much both of them hate Colby Covington, so I kind of feel like Usman might try to avoid that rematch just to stick it to Colby Covington. So I don't know, George, what do you think? Is there any chance here of Wonderboy or even Burns getting a jump in here, or man, poor Leon Edwards, he's got to be in there too. Lay it all out for us.
Well, there's a slight chance, but there's not a great chance. Just like Go's reference, the heavyweight division is chaos. And no pun intended, but yeah, anything can happen. And look at Whitaker. Whitaker lined up to fight Adesanya 2 times, and the UFC went to him, but it was all about timing. He just couldn't make it happen, So he's finally going to get his shot, it looks like now. But I would say that the loser of the Usman sweepstakes between Covington, who's in the pole position here, let's be clear, the UFC's already said that. But whoever doesn't get Usman out of Edwards and Covington, I could see the winner of Burns and Thompson get that guy. So that's the best I can come up with. But Thompson, for crying out loud, like Nolan said, this could be 3 in a row. Get an emphatic statement win. That's what he really, really needs. If he can get one of those, then who knows? He may be able to cut that line in case there's a contract situation or an injury, or Usman plays the I'm Usman card. This is who I want. He's got to get a finish. He's got to make a statement.
Yeah, that's a great point I think you touched on there. If you just get a decision win, that's not going to be enough. But you go out there and get some kind of highlight reel knockout, then all of a sudden, like you said, maybe the cards start shuffling a little bit. Well, guys, a surprising late addition to UFC 264 was Regiment Training Center bantamweight Chris Moutinho, who stepped in as a short notice to face top prospect Sean O'Malley. Now, Louis Smolka was supposed to face O'Malley. He was forced to withdraw. When he did, it seemed like there was no end to the number of fighters willing to step in. However, the UFC looked outside the promotion to CFFC, I might add. Great place to go look. And they brought in Moutinho. Did they make the right choice? Or was there a better one on the table that was teed up, ready to go? Like I said, it seemed like there were a whole lot of hands in the air. Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Tell us what you think about it. Nolan, get us started.
Well, I think it's important to kind of recognize from our perspective, I don't think we necessarily have a great picture of what goes on behind the scenes. I mean, we saw it with even the way that this news unraveled. There was a lot of butting of heads between Sean O'Malley's camp and Ricky Simone's camp, but it turns out that they were looking for different things in this fight. So who knows what sort of options were actually presented? Who knows what the UFC, their vetting system, there's, the LFA champion from Georgia offered, for example, right? Can he get here? Is his visa something that they can do? And then it turns out Ricky Simone, Cody Stammen, these guys that raised their hands, they wanted catchweights. They wanted featherweight fights. And that's not what O'Malley wanted. That's not what the UFC wanted. So it's easy for us to sit back and say, hey, there's all these guys raising their hands to fight Sean O'Malley. But we don't know the practicality, the likelihood of them even being able to get cleared or come here or whatever in terms of their visas. We don't know any of that stuff. We don't know who is actually able to actually step in there. So the fact that O'Malley wanted to stay at bantamweight to me makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's preparing for that weight. He's on weight. Why would he, give somebody a 5-10 pound allowance that would certainly be bigger than him on fight night? So I just don't think we have enough information to really tell. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but it's the reality,
Yeah, it's actually one that I'm sure Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard will appreciate you saying, because that's something I think does go unseen sometimes is, yeah, there are people ready to step in, but not at certain weight classes, that sort of thing. It's a very fair point, Nolan, and a good one. And I guess it just kind of goes to show you where Sean O'Malley's head is at, that he really wants to get a bantamweight win. I mean, does a 140 win move you up in the ranking? Does a featherweight win move you up in the bantamweight rankings? Who knows? George, what do you think? Did you see any options on the table that made more sense to you than this one?
I can totally understand, I appreciate Simone and Stamen offering, saying, look, 10 days away, I can get there, but at 45. But if O'Malley was set on saying at 35, I can respect that too. But still, there was two other names out there, Tim Elliott, Merab Dvalishvili. Both of them claimed they could make 135. Now, Elliott's more known as a flyweight. So does that really raise the stock if you can beat a flyweight at a bantamweight, in a bantamweight bout, late notice? Probably not. But Dvalishvili's ranked ahead of him. And, I mean, so much so that he's got Mariah's coming up in September. That's what the UFC thinks of Dvalishvili. So I think that would have been a good one for O'Malley to take. Now, look, O'Malley's now on his 6th fight. And he gets a lot of comparisons to Conor McGregor. Oh, they're kind of guiding him, babying him or whatever. McGregor, by his 6th fight, was fighting Chad Mendes. Now, he didn't get tripped up along the way. He was undefeated, whereas O'Malley does have that L. That was hung on him by Marlon Vera. So I get that. But still, it would have been a good way to right the ship and get a ranked guy and just get on that trajectory. So I think Dvalishvili would have been perfect.
Yeah, I'm happy for Moutinho that he got this call, but I was hoping for that Merab Dvalishvili fight as well. I guess they wanted to keep that one intact, though. I don't know, Goes, what do you think? I mean, Sean O'Malley, I think, is getting a lot of criticism for this one. It's not really his fault. Did you see any better matchups out there available for him, or was this the right play to make?
I don't know if it's the right play. I mean, guys, when you offer your friend a ride to the airport or you want to help him move, when you damn well know they already have a ride, they already have somebody to help. I think probably 5 out of those 10 fighters felt that way as well. I don't know that they were really going to do that, but there were some that were serious players, and you have to respect that. At some point, though, the one advantage you have to look at for Sean O'Malley is preparation, and he has that over everybody. You have to look at previous scenarios, right? Like think about Conor McGregor and Chad Mendes. Right? At some point, you have to have confidence in your fighter, and you throw him out there. And I think they should have confidence in Sean O'Malley because he's a tough fighter. I think he could possibly win some of those matchups. I kind of like the Cody Stammen matchup. Granted, I know it would be at featherweight, but hey, if you're looking at it from the organization standpoint, if your guy loses, hey, but that was a featherweight, and you just reset, right? But to go outside of the promotion, I think was probably a bad move when you had so many people there willing to take the fight.
Yeah, it's funny. We just laid out all the challenges that the UFC matchmakers face, but then I have to turn it back to them and say, you're the one that made this fight. People criticizing Sean O'Malley, man. He's just taking what they offered him. So, interesting to see how it all plays out here. Guys, July kicks off with UFC 264, as we talked about in this massive trilogy fight between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. But it wraps up July 31st with Bellator 263 and what I think is perhaps the biggest fight in Bellator history with Patricio Pitbull versus the undefeated AJ McKee for the promotion's featherweight title, a Grand Prix title, $1 million. If you look at the MMA Junkie rankings, Poirier versus McGregor is number 2 versus number 4 at lightweight, while Pitbull versus McKee is number 3 versus number 5 at featherweight. So we're talking about massive, massive fights in both those divisions. So let's play a little Sophie's Choice here. You only get to watch one of those 2 fights. Which one is it? We'll put 4 minutes on the clock. George, let's start it with you.
Oof, man. Oh, this is so tough. And let me tell you something. I don't want anyone to say, well, of course that's what he's going to say. Because UFC 263 had a main event of Adesanya versus Vettori. I'd rather watch the other one over that one. But we're up against 264, man. Massive. Could be the highest pay-per-view grosser ever, or at least a solid number 2. That one's going to be tough to beat. And heck, even if I just go back to last week's UFC's presentation in the main event, Volkov versus Gane, I would rather watch that featherweight title. Like you said, John, so much at stake. $1 million, a Grand Prix win, which is pretty historic, you know, and he's defending the belt during the whole process. Plus, we finally get to see 2 guys that despise each other actually scrap, 2 guys that have worked their way up the USA Today rankings. You know, it's a tougher road for those guys because they don't have as many consistent top guys in front of them. So it's a definite one where I want to go to bat for McKee and Pitbull, but I just can't because it's Poirier versus McGregor. McGregor's special, man. I mean, he's once in a lifetime, you almost want to say. I'm sure there'll be someone else, and I'll regret saying that, but at this point, his fights are just pretty special. In Vegas, I got to see that one. It was tough, though.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because you're talking about really the biggest star in the history of the sport. I mean, and we don't – hey, listen, let's be honest. We don't know how many more times Conor McGregor is going to fight. These are events, right? But, man – that Pitbull McKee fight, I've been looking forward to that one for a long time, and we had to get through a whole Grand Prix to get there, and it played out. Normally these things fall apart. It's a big one. Goes, what do you think? You can only watch one. Which one is it?
Well, Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier have already fought twice. I've seen it already twice. So give me the fresh matchup. I know you're going to think I lost my rockers, but listen, here's what's going on. There's so much on the line. $1 million. There's heat between the 2 fighters, that stare down that they had. The storyline's incredible. Will AJ McKee take that next step? Not to mention, how about just their skill sets, the way they match up? What a great matchup. We all wanted to see this be the final. Here it is. When you break it down, it could be a super technical fight because both fighters can fight that way, or it could be a banger because both fighters can fight that way. But here's the thing. Here's what people don't know. By the time it's fight night, I bet you it will be a trilogy. Because if I know AJ McKee well enough, and I know Pitbull, there's going to be the first fight's going to be in the lobby, the second one's going to be at the buffet, and the third one will be in the cage. So by the time we get there, it will be a trilogy. If it's at the buffet, I'll have a front row seat.
That's great. No, you're so right about it. I think you hit a key part of it there, though, right? I mean, like if this was Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor fighting for the very first time, well, we got to tune in and see that one, right? But we literally just saw the fight 6 months ago. So, Nolan, what do you think? I mean, you know these 2 fighters well over in Bellator, but you're talking about huge stars in the UFC as well. Which one do you got to tune in for?
Well, I think my comments here might get me impeached with the committee of the Uncasville that determined that I'm the mayor. Apparently, some have called me. So I'm going to have to go with McGregor Poirier. I mean, is there anything in the sport ever that's been more of a spectacle than when Conor McGregor fights? You add a trilogy on top of it. You add the return of fans for a McGregor fight on top of it. I mean, it's just an unfair comparison to put anything up against the beast that is a McGregor trilogy fight. So I know it might sound like I'm kind of going against my roots here, but I got to go with the UFC, and it's a good thing that I don't have to Sophie's Choice it, and that I can watch both because I think I'm going to be out in LA, and I would have to bird box it, go blindfolded and press draw, and I'm glad that I don't have to do that. So McGregor versus Poirier 3, no disrespect to AJ McKee versus Pitbull. That's going to be the biggest, best fight in Bellator history, but it's a McGregor fight. It's a trilogy. Can't pick against it.
I hear the calls. You hear that? They're calling for his impeachment over there in the fight sphere. Mayor no more, man. I'll tell you what, I'm glad you guys had to answer this question. I'm not going to answer the question because I just absolutely can't. I want to see them both. Guys, this past weekend was a holiday weekend in sports. Biggest promotions weren't in action, but some of the big news broke last week with the main event of UFC 265 being an interim heavyweight title fight between Derek Lewis and Ciryl Gane. Now, look, I honestly don't think there's any way to justify this being an interim title fight other than it was a business decision, right? They need that fight in Houston. They need Derek Lewis. They need a headliner. So I get all that. And it's a great opportunity for Lewis and Gane. But for guys like Francis Ngannou, Stipe Miocic, John Jones, it can't be a great thing. It screws up the whole schedule. So which one of those guys is paying the biggest price here with this interim title? Or maybe is there even somebody else that I'm not thinking of that's kind of getting the short end of the stick here? Who's getting the worst of it with this situation? We'll put 4 minutes on the clock. Goes, get us started.
I think Stipe Miocic is the biggest loser here, guys. And please don't cut that as an individual clip. But when you look at Lewis and Gane, that's set. It's going to happen. When that happens, you have to add probably another 3 months to this whole timetable. And Ngannou's got to fight the winner. God forbid there's an injury, there's controversy in the fight. So many things can happen. And then you have John Jones on the outside. How long are you going to make him wait? You cannot put John Jones in a heavyweight matchup that doesn't have a title involved. It's too big of a risk, right? So now you're telling Stipe Miocic, wait even longer there on the side. What if Francis loses the title? I mean, it really messes everything up for Stipe Miocic. And you got to remember, Stipe Miocic is a quiet assassin. He doesn't really come out and say very much. So you don't really have to worry about chirping on his behalf. I think he's going to get stuck having to take another matchup until this is all set. But unless John Jones does something crazy outside that could possibly cost him that next shot, I think Stipe Miocic is the one that's going to be hurt, and he's going to have to wait for a long time, and he's going to have to take another matchup.
John Jones doing something crazy out of the cage. What are you talking about, Goes? That would never happen. Nolan, what do you think here? Is it Stipe? I mean, that's a pretty compelling case there. Is he the one that's getting the short end, or is this more of a rougher situation for somebody else involved?
I mean, I still think, and again, I think Ghost brought up some good points there that some people outside of the picture are getting, kind of collateral damage. But to me, it's still Francis Ngannou. I mean, what kind of message is it to your champion that, hey, you fought 4 months ago, but you want to go visit your family? Like, the show's moving on without you. This is supposed to be the biggest, baddest, most promotable man in the world right here. And getting that sort of treatment. And I get it. Like you said, like John said at the beginning of this, Derek Lewis in Houston seems like a major ticket seller, especially for a promotion that's returning to the same arena for the second time in 3 or 4 months. So I get it from a business perspective, but at the same time, I mean, Francis said he would fight in September. Now it's going to be probably December, January before he gets in there again, delaying another payday for no reason other than something outside of his control and being portrayed as the bad guy. So to me, I think Francis got the short end of the stick, and it's just kind of unfortunate to see. Hopefully this isn't one of those things like John Jones where this gets dragged out and there's all sorts of issues with contracts and stuff going forward. I don't think anybody would want to see that,
Yeah, you make a good point there too, because it seemed like Francis was kind of surprised by it all happening. And again, we understand the business of why it was done, but you think you would make it very clear with Francis, like, hey, big guy, don't worry, man. We still got you. We just needed to do this if you don't mind. So that is kind of a weird situation. George, what do you think? Who's getting it worse here?
Well, Miocic doesn't fight very often in his latter stages, hasn't fought very often in the latter stages. So I'm not sure he's hurt too much. I'm sure as a former champion, he probably can't wait to get back in there. So I imagine he would have not waited a whole year, which is kind of what he was, doing in the past. But I think it's got to be John Jones here, and I'll tell you why. Because John Jones is 18 months into not being a UFC champion, and when he fights, who knows what kind of money he's going to be able to make. I'm sure he probably can negotiate a pay-per-view cut, even despite the fact that he's not a champion. But I don't know. That's just too long for John Jones, who's arguably the GOAT and still the best guy on the roster. Could make a strong statement, argument for that, to not be fighting somehow, And so now you got an interim bout where the winner gets that he's almost locked into a shot versus undisputed. They got to unify. So that postpones things even longer for John Jones. And if Ngannou and Lewis get matched up and Ngannou wins, but let's say it's a classic, now you're looking at trilogies, all kinds of stuff. I just think John Jones just played the hand wrong from the very beginning when he relinquished 205, and now he's just sitting there on the side.
It's crazy, man. Like you said, arguably the greatest of all time, and he's just sitting out all this time, and we really have no idea when he could potentially fight again, man. This situation, I get why the UFC had to do it, but everybody got the short end of the stick here, man. It's nuts. Well, guys, it doesn't get any bigger this weekend's event at UFC 264. That card will surely dominate the headlines all week long. We'll discuss the fallout from that card and anything else that happens right here on Spinning Back Clique.